Hello, you're watching The Big Story with me, Chiao Suen. Subscribe to the Straits Times channel to stay up to date with our live news updates. Now, have you found yourself spending more money recently? Well, you're not alone. Consumer prices in Singapore rose at a faster pace in the first month of 2023, pushed up by Chinese New Year buying and the higher goods and services tax that had just kicked in. Core inflation, which excludes the costs of private transport and accommodation, rose to 5.5% year-on-year in January, the highest since November 2008. The January figure is up from 5.1% in December, but a tad lower than the 5.6% expected by analysts in a Bloomberg poll. These numbers reflect the expenses of Singapore households more accurately. Joining us now is Barnabas Gan, Senior Economist at RHB. Thanks for joining us today, Barnabas. So, consumer prices and core inflation spiked in Singapore in the first month of this year and is now the highest since late 2008. Do we see this as a trend likely to continue upwards, or do you think this is just a one-off?
Well, I think there are two ways to look at it. I think first and foremost, we did see that January's inflation prints have been affected by the increase in the GST rate from 7 to 8%. That was effective in January this year. And of course, more so, it was the relatively earlier Chinese New Year festivities, that has also likely, increased inflation from a seasonal, basis. But I think what's important and, really more so interesting really is the fact that commodity prices have actually gone down very starkly into January this year. In fact, key commodity benchmarks like Brent, crude oil, copper, and even natural gas has actually gone down and decelerated to negative territories on a year-on-year basis in January this year. So what we do see is that with moderating commodity prices, that may mean that supply inflation into Singapore may also decelerate into the year ahead. I think what is also disconcerting really is the domestic drivers whereby wage inflation will likely stay sticky, and this means that with the tighter labor market that Singapore is actually seeing at this juncture, that could actually be one of the key drivers for inflation into the year ahead.
So we're talking a lot about inflation, right? But what does a higher core inflation actually mean? What is the real-world impact on everyday Singaporeans?
Well, I think that if you look at inflation per se, the higher core inflation will really mean that, at least from the layman perspective, disposable income may likely decline simply because of the fact that we have to pay more for necessities, and of course we see that the drivers for inflation, at least in January, remains to be food and transport, and this means that the relatively inelastic, products and stuff that we buy will actually increase in price regardless of whether we consume it. More so, even though if we buy them, and if we consume them, these prices are still going to increase given what we have seen in January. The consolation perhaps really is from the Singapore budget that has been announced really is that there has been policies that have been introduced to actually try to mitigate inflation, and this actually includes, the GST vouchers, the permanent GST vouchers, and as well as the enhancement to the assurance package. And we believe really is that from these policies alone, the average Singaporeans, especially the lower, the medium to the medium income, group, will actually see, some mitigation of inflation risk into the year ahead.
So, you've mentioned that prices might continue to go up. So as the prices of necessities go up, do you have any advice for us? How can we get through these financially trying times?
Well, I guess that the key way to actually combat inflation is two fronts. One is to earn more, hopefully, and that's everybody's dream, to earn more, and of course to have inflation combating, strategies, whereby that make our money work harder for us. So I guess that one of the key variables that economists look at very closely is labor productivity, and it is found to be positively correlated, with remunerations. So one of the ways, to combat inflation this year, and hopefully, when we see wage adjustments into the end of the year, into next year, the increased productivity that Singaporeans will see into the end of the year will be a key driver for higher wages, and that should mitigate inflation from a nominal wage aspect. And I think that with interest rates are still really very high at this juncture, there could actually be some opportunities in investments, as well as in savings, and whereby take advantage of the higher rates, whereby you can actually allow your money to work harder for you, given the high interest rate environment at this juncture.
Sounds to me like it's a really important time to really think about what we're doing with our money. Thank you so much for your valuable insight. This has been Barnabas Gan, Senior Economist at RHB. And in Parliament today, the second day of the debate on Budget 2023 continues. MP for Sengkang JAMUS Lim, in his speech, addressed the issue of the increase in the Central Provident Fund salary ceiling. He raised concerns over how it might affect certain segments of the population and questioned why employer contributions weren't increased to match those of employees.
Now, the budget also raises the CPF ceiling from $6,000 to $8,000. Minister Wong explained that this was about, quote, keeping pace with inflation, unquote. I understand that this will not affect lower income earners who earn below the ceiling, and that while it will reduce take-home pay for those earning more than $8,000 by about $400, the increased employer contributions mean that certain workers will enjoy a modest pay bump of around $340 as their employer contributions rise. Pay increases to cope with inflation are certainly a good thing, as it's making sure that our savings are adequate for retirement. However, for the typical middle-class family in Sengkang, the smaller take-home will stretch already tight budgets. The $400 could mean cutting back on tuition fees or that extra visit to the dentist for the family. Is there an alternative way? One wonders why the government did not choose the route of returning the employer contribution to the full 20% instead. After all, this was the status quo in the 1990s until the Asian financial crisis. The employer share has since been cut and raised a number of times since, but equal share that was the case in the past has never been fully restored. Now, while I understand that the need to provide employers with relief in the wage bill during a recession, we aren't in one now. While restoring the employer contribution alone will not fully make up for the additional CPF savings that would result from an increased ceiling, one is still left to wonder why this approach wasn't part of the consideration for addressing the effects of inflation on CPF.
About 14,000 MECONNECT users have had their passwords reset after their accounts were accessed by an unidentified external party. National broadcaster MediaCorp said login credentials to the accounts, which are used to access its services such as online streaming platform MeWatch, were not leaked from the system. It also said further investigations did not reveal any evidence that users' personal data had been misused or disclosed to the public. Payment information had not been compromised, with MediaCorp informing all affected account holders and resetting their passwords. Now, LEGO has unveiled a new range of figures with physical and mental disabilities. The toy manufacturer says it features a diverse cast of characters taking on new challenges in today's modern world. The range, called Friends, includes characters with anxiety and missing limbs. The diversity even extends to animals, with a dog in a wheelchair part of the cast. The first set of products was launched this week, along with a 44-minute episode of the LEGO Friends YouTube animated series. And those are our top stories for today. Visit straitstimes.com for more news and our YouTube channel for more videos. Subscribe by hitting the red button below. I'm Chao Suen, and I'll see you tomorrow on The Big Story.